Did you feel good about your baby feeding experiences, regardless of how they turned out? Did you feel supported to make the choices that felt right for you in the moment? Did you feel pushed into feeding your baby in a particular way? Or in looking back, do you feel sad about how your baby feeding turned out? Most of the time on Thursdays, I deliver evidence based information or my own thoughts about a particular topic related to human milk feeding. But this week, I decided to bring on somebody else to help me discuss this, dissect this, and to see how she helps to support her clients to feel good about baby feeding, regardless of how it turns out. Enjoy. Hey, HeHe, welcome to the Milk Making Minutes.
Hello. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. So you are postpartum and birth doula, childbirth educator, host of the Birth Lounge podcast. You're a force to be reckoned with in the birth world. So I'm having you on to discuss something very specific, which is how families feel really good about their feeding plan or what they end up doing despite how aligned it is with what they originally thought they would do. Do you want to tell us a little bit about all the families you've seen and the various types of services that you offer to people and all that stuff?
Thanks so much for your very kind and flattering words. I appreciate that. It always feels weird when people call me like a force to be reckoned with because I'm a very petite, like I'm 5'4". I don't weigh very much, and I'm always like, am I? Okay, but thank you very much. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. In terms of services and the support that we provide for families, you and I are in so much alignment there. It's really about helping families find what's right for them. And there's a multitude of factors that go into that I'm sure you talk a lot about on other episodes. It's your whole MO, as it is mine. Their mental health, their family dynamics, their interpersonal relationships, their well-being, their baby's growth and development, their bond with their baby, their goals, the supports they have, the access that they either have or don't have. There's a lot of things that go into it. And I like to think about it as a recipe. Everybody's going to have their own ingredients. So what recipe do we make with the ingredients that you have to get the dish that you're hoping to get? But yeah, otherwise we support families all throughout that pregnancy and birth and labor and postpartum experience. We're a concierge service, so it's a 24-hour concierge service, and that's that. It's
Yeah. How many people do you have on your team?
Yeah, right now we're a team of 10, and that kind of fluctuates. Our in-person team constantly grows, and our we have a back-end team that does managing the website, managing our podcast, the Birth Launch podcast. I have a monthly membership for expecting parents. It's a childbirth education membership. I have someone online that manages the tech part of that, the app part, uploading new information, managing the content, things like that. And then we have that in person that do the prenatals and the birth and the postpartum. But we're a team of 10 right now. The back end is what fluctuates.
Do you often see the same family throughout the whole perinatal period?
Yeah, a lot of times some people find our services only after their baby gets here.
Hmm.
Some people find our services for something specific like sleep support, overnight care, feeding support, postpartum debriefing stuff. But yeah, for the most part, our clients get with us usually around 16 weeks of pregnancy. We're with them throughout their pregnancy, attend their labors, and then we're usually with our clients 4 to 6 months postpartum. Our smallest package includes 12 weeks postpartum care.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so when clients come to you, they probably have some idea of how they want to feed their baby.
Yeah.
And do you help them hone in on what that idea might look like more specifically in the prenatal period?
Familial history. How were you fed? Do you have any sisters? Do you have any female cousins that are feeding babies? How do they feed their babies? We like to get a sense of what has this person been exposed to. It helps us get their starting point, and it helps us understand maybe some of the misinformation or biases that they come to the table with. When we have that, then we move into your options. So let's talk about that option that you think is your goal right now. And now we'd like to talk to you about the other options. If somebody comes to us and says, "This is my goal, and I know it is my goal, and I'm not changing," we'll give them the option. Do you want to talk about other options? I don't. Okay, great. Then we don't have to. But that's where we start, is that education piece. And I think it's really important to do that prenatally, especially because everyone knows this, but you especially know this. Once your baby gets here, things can pivot quickly for reasons that are out of our control. For we have a lot of control in how we feed our baby, but sometimes things in birth, sometimes things in the labor and delivery, sometimes things postpartum pop up that are out of our control and are going to pose disruptions to maybe our original feeding plan.
Yeah. You know what? On the milk making minutes, the first question I usually ask my guests is, what was your exposure to baby feeding growing up? What are your earliest memories of seeing people feed babies? When you pretended to feed baby dolls or stuffed animals, did you do it with a bottle? Did you do it at your body? And it's really interesting to hear the responses people give. They'll say, I have no memory of ever seeing anybody breastfeed as a child, or, oh, yeah, I had lots of cousins and everybody breastfed. But it's really interesting because breastfeeding is a learned behavior. It is not an instinctual behavior. Even chimps, if they are born into captivity, they cannot breastfeed their babies often if they have not seen another chimp feed their babies. And so it's really cool that you do that with your clients prenatally, because what we have been exposed to does impact our ability to do it, and also how we think about feeding our babies.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us come to the table thinking we have a lot of information about how to feed babies, but in reality, there's a lot of gaps. And so that question is simply to understand what information is this person starting with, because it lets our team understand what gaps they have and how we can fill those, or at least give them resources to fill those if they're interested in it.
In just a moment, you are going to hear HeHe talk about how she helps people to understand the various scenarios that might occur given the birth setting that is chosen. And I think this is an area where many people come into their birth not fully understanding what the long term consequences of the decisions they make in the birth room might be. So I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation with HeHe. But before we do, take a minute to hear me rave about my sponsor, Feast and Fettle. And when you support them using my code MILK, you're also supporting me. You've heard me now for a few months talking about how much I've enjoyed getting home cooked meals delivered right to my front door from feastandfettle.com. And I'm here today to tell you that if you know somebody who is in the postpartum period, who you would like to provide true support to, that you should go to feastandfettle.com and order home cooked meals to be delivered right to their front door. One of the biggest barriers to breastfeeding success is a lack of support. A new parent is feeding a baby up to 15 times a day. How on earth do we expect that person to feed that baby that many times, also feed themselves, and provide meals to other members of their family? There's not enough time. You know how hard it is as a busy parent yourself to try to put meals on the table. Go to feastandfettle.com, use my code MILK, MILK, coordinate which meals they would like to have delivered, and send them a week's worth of delicious meals. And be the person who eases the burden for them. What a gift. I can't think of a better way to support somebody in the postpartum period. Exactly. Okay. And so you help them formulate this plan prenatally, and then they go into the birth. And then I'm sure that you have clients who birth in a variety of settings: hospital, birth center, home birth. So you are with people during their birth, or sometimes they don't have a birth doula and they choose to birth without you there. And the birth setting can impact feeding because various providers are comfortable with physiological birth, which can then impact how feeding goes, or various interventions can make feeding more difficult or less difficult. And so, how do you help clients to understand that prenatally and then deal with it once it happens, given what their birth setting is going to be?
Yeah. So education all the way prenatally. We are talking about the exact interventions. For example, IV fluids, right? It is a standard procedure. It is going to impact your breastfeeding. You need to understand that it doesn't make it right or wrong. It doesn't make it good or bad. It doesn't make it something that you should 100% decline. It means let's use it as medically indicated, right? Let's give the people who need IV fluids, and for the people who do get IV fluids, let's be honest with them about how this is going to impact what's coming down the pike for them in terms of breastfeeding. Let's also, once we get to postpartum, hold space for that, right? If you know
Mhm.
this person had an IV for 24 hours and you're saying to her on day 2, "Your milk hasn't come in, your milk hasn't come in." We expect someone after they've had 24 hours of fluids to probably not have milk 24 hours. That's early for a lot of people, right? Especially for someone who has had milk. That's a misaligned, that's an inappropriate expectation, and now this person, this medical professional has just taught this patient, oh my God, my body is failing me. My body's not doing what it's supposed to do. When in reality, we literally never expected your body to be able to do that in the first place. And
Mhm.
in addition, you had 24 hours of fluid, right? It's these type of conversations. And then helping our clients learn how to advocate for that. So they have this information. Now they're in the moment and they are, instead of saying, oh my God, my body failed me, they say, isn't it, wouldn't 24 hours be fast for someone's milk to transition anyway? And that medical professional goes, yeah, but your baby's hungry. And they say, okay, and I had fluids, right? So doesn't that delay it just a little bit further? And that medical professional goes, oh yeah, okay, all right. And then my client can say, I actually harvested colostrum. I would like to use that instead of formula that you are suggesting. Could we talk about that option? Or maybe they don't want their medical professional's opinion, and they say, I am choosing to feed my baby with colostrum because I harvested it and it's right over here in the ice chest, right? Prenatally, I think it's all about understanding not only what your options are, but how are you actually going to achieve those? And how do we communicate your goals and those options with your provider? Which goes back to, and you and I talked about this on the Birth Lounge podcast. Listeners, you should go check that out because we talk about the importance of finding someone who's aligned with you. It's
Mm.
make it or break it in your breastfeeding journey to make sure that your professional is supporting the goals that you have.
Yeah, and that's really hard in some settings
Yeah.
because in some settings, you just get who you get, and they walk in and they feel entitled to give their opinions regardless of whether or not you want them. So, you have to be really confident in the knowledge that you've built in the
Yeah.
prenatal period. So, how can people feel that confidence and the knowledge that they have built prenatally when fear is being brought into the birth room?
Yeah. A couple of things. I think, again, it goes back to that education. The more education that you have, the more you understand what's going on in your body, the more you understand appropriate expectations from your body, the more you will be able to stand in confidence and say, I appreciate your clinical suggestion, but I actually know that this is an evidence based option for me, and I'm going to choose to feed my baby with the colostrum I have harvested, right? I appreciate your concern, but at this time, I'm not concerned with my baby's weight loss because I know they're going to have slightly higher weight loss because I had an epidural and IV fluids for more than 24 hours for whatever it was, right? The more you know your shit, the less people are going to be able to mess around with you.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, that is it, and then you need to be able to set boundaries. So, I think this goes for professionals and family members. If you are choosing to breastfeed and you know that nobody in your family has breastfed, everyone else has chosen something different, and just during pregnancy, they weren't very supportive. There's always offhanded comments, always like jokes at your expense. When your baby gets here, you should set some boundaries. Personally, I think you should set those boundaries in pregnancy, but I understand that can be really hard. Boundaries are hard, right? It's so hard to set them and it's so hard to hold them. But it's really imperative in your feeding journey that you surround yourself with people who support you, because breastfeeding is already really hard. It is something that takes a lot of dedication, and it takes constantly reminding yourself of your why and choosing to do it every day. And if you constantly have someone yakking in your ear negative things, backhanded comments, it is going to be really hard. And a couple of things that you might be able to say is, we feel confident in the way that we're feeding our baby. If I am looking for suggestions, I promise to come to you because you're one of my trusted people. Let them
Mm.
know I'm not looking for your opinion, but if I do, I will come to you because I love you and I trust you. You could say something like, I really appreciate all of your suggestions, but right now I'm not open to thinking about other ways to feed my baby. I would like to prioritize breastfeeding. If I change my mind, I'll come to you for advice, for support, for whatever it is. You can do it in a gentle way that says thank you, and I recognize you're trying to be helpful, and I love you, but I don't need your opinion. I don't want your help. Right now, I'm not in a space I feel confident in what I have chosen. And it gives them the reassurance of, I'm not dumping you to the side of the highway. I'm going to come to you if I want your help, right?
Mhm.
People want to be helpful. I think a lot of people don't know how to be helpful. It's the same thing as telling parents, oh, just wait till your baby gets here. You're never going to sleep. That shit ain't helpful. Do not say that to new parents.
Mhm.
That stuff puts fear in parents. People don't know what to say. They say it in a joking, loving manner, but for that expectant mom, she's, oh my God, I'm never going to sleep again, right? And that person never meant it with malintent. But we have to be very careful with our words, for sure.
Yeah, you know what? I think that this is true regardless of what your feeding choice is. So, if you are choosing to formula feed, if you are choosing to exclusively pump, if you are choosing to do some sort of mix, we all feel we're getting judged no matter what choice we make. And so being able to say, this is what's right for me and my family, I will come to you when I have questions, if I need to change my plan, is a great way of setting that boundary. We can't put what we have experienced
Yeah.
on other people.
Don't allow other
Mhm.
people to put their beliefs on you if it's not aligned with you, or if you're even curious about another option. I think that's almost my next point is, you should seek out support from people that are aligned with you, and think about doing this prenatally. Call an IBC, get an IBC on your list of people I can call when my baby gets here. Get a
Mhm.
postpartum doula on the
Mhm.
list of people you can call when your baby gets here.
Mhm.
PFPT, chiropractor, dog walker, someone to
Mhm.
come clean your house, someone who does the laundry. Put together people who can help you, because breastfeeding is a mental load. Feeding your baby in general. Having a baby is mental load. Let's just break it all the way down. Having a
Mhm.
baby is mental load. I mean, it just causes so much mental load, right? No matter how you feed your baby. The more mental load that you can offload to somebody, do that if you have the means to do it, and you'll have more capacity to focus on your feeding journey in order to keep yourself mentally well, in order to continue to prioritize maybe a really strenuous feeding journey through a couple days as you're reaching a new goal. Sometimes we do have to have routines that aren't fun. Like, being an exclusive pumper takes up a ton of time. If you're working with an IBCLC who recommends triple feeding, that takes up a ton of time. If you are working with a professional who tells you to leave your baby upright for 30 minutes after feeding, that takes up a ton of time. There's a lot of opinions and suggestions and recommendations you're going to get, and we have to account for the time. And I think asking for help, bringing people into your world in order to help you, especially in those first few days and weeks. And it can be temporary help that as you get better at your footing and you get more solid in your routines and more confident in your new role, you can start to get rid of the help that you no longer need, and we can shift those responsibilities back to you. It's hard to ask for help, but you mentioned the chimpanzees not being able to do this. I think part of it is that they don't have a community around them that can show them how to do it. But I think that community means more than just having people show you what to do. That community is designed to actually care for you when you have a baby. And unfortunately, we don't have that in the US, just built into our culture. So we have to seek it out and pay for it a lot of times, which can definitely be prohibitive in a lot of ways. But if you do have the means, asking for help is huge. Asking for help regardless, but being able to get that help, I understand, is limited in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so then you have somebody who's in that early postpartum period, and they're setting boundaries, they're asking for what they need. And then sometimes you might think whatever your plan was prenatally is working out in the early postpartum days. And then you get to a couple of weeks in, a couple of months in, and you need to shift the plan. And it might be shifting to from full breastfeeding to some sort of mix. It might be going to exclusive pumping. It might be switching to formula feeding. And with all the families that you have supported, there are people who switch the plan, and years later, they still report feeling devastated about switching the plan.
Yeah.
And then there are those people who switch the plan and they say, "It was the best thing I ever did. I felt really good about my decision. I wish I had done it sooner." What makes the difference in feeling good in the final baby feeding outcome past that initial postpartum period into the thick of it and not feeling good about how it's ended up?
Yeah. Okay, so this is going to have an answer and then a bullet underneath it. So this is
Mm.
like a yes and question. The first answer is, I think if parents can be the ones that are the decision maker, truly having transparent information, both the good and the bad, talking about all their alternatives, regardless of the professionals who's helping them's biases or their own beliefs, right? We've truly sat this person down and said, here are your options, here are the pros and cons of each of them. And these are the other alternatives plus the pros and cons of them, everything that you need to know. I think if that parent can be the one that says, I want this, and they get a professional that goes, okay, great, let's make a plan to do that. That is how we avoid that feeding journey trauma. It's essentially trauma that is coming
Mhm.
back up years later of what? I felt dismissed. I felt dehumanized. I felt silenced. I felt pressured to do something I didn't want to do, whether it is to keep feeding or to end feeding. It doesn't matter. If that autonomy and the respect for that person's decision making for themselves is not honored, you're causing trauma for them.
Mm.
And that's super unfortunate. So I think that's the first thing. The bullet underneath, though, and I think it deserves a couple asterisks, is you won't always have a choice, which sucks because
Mhm.
that is going to give inherent trauma that we can't avoid. If we are not able to breastfeed our baby because something has come up, let's say something medically, something like a cleft lip or a cleft palate might prevent someone from being able to go in their feeding on their feeding journey in a way that they had hoped for, and it may totally disrupt what you had planned, and your original plan is actually not attainable. I've seen it where it's
Mhm.
literally, unfortunately, that is no longer an option for us. That sucks. So that's the asterisk, that's the bullet, that's the caveat of when if and when we can give parents control, you should do it 100% of the time because that's how we're going to have parents feel supported and love their feeding journey no matter what they choose. Sometimes that's not possible, and that is just sheer statistics. There will always be a percentage of control that humans don't have over nature.
Yeah, the asterisk I'll add to your asterisk is because I often talk to people both on the podcast and in my practice who don't have control over the situation, but they feel dismissed
Mm,
by both people in their lives and providers. They're grieving and they feel dismissed that they're grieving. And so I think that both people in your life need to be taught that it's okay for you to grieve, and providers listening need to know that we need to validate whatever feelings come up for that person. So the
yeah.
fact that you just said, and it sucks. So whatever is coming up for that person, we can say to them, oh my gosh, this totally sucks. I hear you. Because I've had a lot of clients say, people just keep telling me I should just be happy that my baby's healthy, that my baby's growing. And yes, I'm glad. It's like when a birth turns from a vaginal birth to a C-section and people are like, "Just be happy that your baby's safe." And they're like, "Yes, of course I'm happy about that, but also I wanted things to go differently and I need people to acknowledge that." It's the same with the baby feeding journey. If people would just stop saying, "Just be okay that everything is gonna work out in the end." I think if we can stop and just say, "Of course you're sad," that can go a long way in healing whatever trauma is coming up from the changed plan.
Yeah, like we are multi-dimensional, multi-layered. We have so many intricacies as humans. I can be thrilled that my baby is here and love them so deeply. Can't even remember what life was like 72 hours ago before they were born. And also be devastated that I can't feed them like I want to because this is shitty and I'm mad about
Mhm.
it. Quite frankly, I'm angry. It's
Mhm.
totally fine to feel angry, rage, guilt, just sadness, pure devastation. All of these things are normal to feel when you have experienced a trauma. And that is what it is. Something has been taken from you that you really wanted. And it's okay to feel those big emotions. They will pass. Know that this is temporary and these big emotions will pass. But it's okay that you feel those. Don't let anybody tell you that you're wrong or you shouldn't feel those because it is very natural and normal for humans to feel those emotions when we have such a pivot that we weren't prepared for and we didn't expect and it was unwanted.
Mhm, and find the people who you can talk to about it.
Ah,
So, I learned in my difficult feeding journey, there were people who I could say, "Oh my gosh, it's so hard," and I wouldn't get unsolicited advice or
yeah.
how, "Oh, this is how I did it," or "Why don't you just stop?" The people who would just say, "Oh man, that does sound like it sucks. Tell me more." And I felt okay to share more, and then I knew the people who, when they would say, "How's feeding going?" I would just say, "Oh, it's fine," because I wasn't going to share more with them. So I learned a few months in who I shared with and who I didn't, and that pertained to both feeding and sleep because it went hand in hand. Sleep was very difficult because feeding was difficult. And so when people would ask, everybody asks, "How's your baby sleeping?" And I would just say, "Fine," even though it wasn't fine to a lot of people. And so I learned, even though I'm typically an open book with most people, I learned not to be an open book with some people about certain topics. And I think that's totally fine. And if the trauma feels like it's lasting for longer than you would expect, that's when you seek out that professional mental health, postpartum mental health counseling so that you can process it in a way that's going to allow you to release it.
Yeah. Man, that's so powerful. I think everybody could stand to hear that, right? This is the message that every mom could stand to hear is set your boundaries, ask for help, have that education, don't be afraid to pivot, find your people.
Mhm.
There's power in that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel like people who feel good about their feeding plans have done in your practice? And as you've seen all your practitioners, all your doulas working with, that you feel like somebody needs to hear before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think my last thing would be to talk to your partner about what your feeding
Mm.
goals are. It's really important that they support you because that is the person who is going through this with you, right? They're the person that if you've got someone who understands and is really supportive, they're the person that's going to be washing your pump parts. They're the people that are going to be making sure that your water is constantly filled. They're the people who are going to be unswaddling your baby and changing their diaper and handing them to you as you get your breast ready. They're the people who are going to get up in the middle of the night and hand you your breastfeeding pillow. They're the people who are going to check in on you. How are you feeling? And we want them to be part of that community that supports you. They are your number one person. They're the closest to you. You spend the most time with them. And so, if anybody knows about breastfeeding knowledge or has that breastfeeding knowledge, it needs to be them. I think about it, guys, like rings in a tree. You're that center, and that first ring is your partner, and your second ring is probably your parents or your best friend or siblings or someone in your close immediate circle. And then you're probably on your third rung going to have some sort of professional, where that be your doula, your IBCLC, your OBGYN. And then beyond that is usually another professional. And then you've got your communities, your new moms groups, your farther out friends, other family members that don't necessarily give you everyday advice. They've breastfed for babies, so you might go to them for some advice one to one, things like that. But that first ring is your partner. It's really important to have them on board. And so you could start prenatally and ask them, what do you know about this? Here are my goals. Where do you think you need to learn to be able to support me? What kind of questions do you have? We should take a lactation class together. We should probably get an IBCLC console on the book so that we could talk to somebody and ask them our questions. I'd like to have a plan of my goals feeding so that we both know what the plan is once the baby gets here, because everybody's told me how tired we're going to be. And I want to make sure that we're prepared for that, whatever it looks like for you and your partner. But I think partner support is huge and it makes a really big difference. The families that we see succeed are the families that have two very dedicated partners. And I can tell you that of the people who quit breastfeeding, I want to say against their will, they did not want to stop their breastfeeding journey. Almost all of them had unsupportive partners who either didn't understand the importance of breastfeeding, didn't understand the importance to their partner, or just wasn't with it. They, for a variety of reasons, bottles are easier. Bottles let me feed the baby. Formula is easier, whatever it may be. There's a variety of reasons partners may not support breastfeeding, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really critical. And I love when partners attend my consults. When they are really involved like that, it is a lot easier for the feeding parent to then remember the information because she's often still in that fog from the birth.
You just don't have to do it by yourself, right? It's often thought about, like, oh, breastfeeding people, you have to do it by yourself. You're the only one that can feed the baby. I, maybe I'm the only one that can like literally latch this baby to my body, but it takes a village to feed this baby. There's more than just baby mouth on boob. Like that, it's
Mhm.
breastfeeding is way more than that. Feeding your baby is way more than that. And so to have, your number one champion behind you, beside you, sometimes behind you, sometimes beside you, depending on what you need.
Mm,
It's really helpful and it really can be make it or break it to know that your partner supports you.
yeah, and I always tell partners too, can you tell when she's in pain? Because often moms they'll just grin and bear it and they think, "Oh,
Yeah.
I'll just deal with the pain." And pain is not helpful for breastfeeding. It actually is con contra indicating for breastfeeding. And so we
Yeah.
don't want pain. And so I say, if you know her tells and you can see she's tense in the shoulders or in the back or in the neck, then you can remind her, hey, I can tell you're in pain. Let's see if we can figure it out. And then that gives them something to focus on during the feeding too. Hey, let's help you reorganize here.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Powerful.
Yeah,
Powerful.
I
I love
know.
it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for everything you do for families, both the families that you work with, but also families who learn from you for free on your podcast and in social media land, and for sharing your time. I know after we recorded for your podcast, you said you had 75 text messages from your team. So
We
I
had
know
someone go into labor, yeah, while we were on the podcast.
so I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking time to share what you have learned over the years.
Thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah. Do you want to share where people can connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on all platforms, I'm just Tranquility by HeHe. You can also on Instagram look up the period birth period lounge. That's the Birth Lounge membership, and then the Birth Lounge podcast, which check out Lo on the episode where we're talking about hospital provided IBCLC support versus that one to one private IBCLC support and how those are different, but also how they can work together and what you need to know about really setting up your lactation support prenatally, but definitely once your baby gets here to help you meet these goals that you have.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been such a delight.
Thank you.
Anyone who has spent any amount of time in the birth world knows that the biggest impact on how you feel about how your birth went and how baby feeding goes is how well informed you are and how much a person feels as if they were the key decision maker, that all the information was presented to them in a neutral way and given to them in a way that helped them understand how their decisions would impact them both in the short term and the long term, and then take that information and make the best decision possible in the moment. And that's what I love about this conversation with HeHe, is that it all boils down to that. So I hope that you are walking away from this conversation feeling empowered, not just in the baby stage, but as your kids grow and you're making other decisions, knowing that the key is just to be as well informed as you can be and to make the best decision you can in the moment and pivot in the future if you need to. So reach out to HeHe, find her on social media. And if you are feeling frazzled, if you're feeling like you can't make decisions because there's too much to do and you don't even have time to put dinner on the table, why not just eliminate that as one of the things you need to do each day? Go to feastandfettle.com, use my code MILK, MILK, to get $30 off if you live in New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maine, or Connecticut. And I know Feast and Fettle is looking to expand, so if they're not in your state yet, let them know you want them to be. Talk to you soon. Bye.